Hello. So, I'm going to ask you a very simple question to start. Do you live in a village? Who lives in a village here? How many of you? Are you sure? How many of you really? Well, I'd like to think that actually everyone does. As a kid, I liked cycling. I still do, but I do a bit less because I have less time for it. But I organized a lot of trips with my friends, and I would cycle around the south of France, where I used to live, at least in France. And I cycled around these very nice villages in Provence. And I was thinking to myself, these are really great places, but they are a bit dead. Nobody really is going there except for tourism, or if you have a really nice property, or if you're just interested in them for their history. So I believe that the tolerant city, which is the topic of the day, has to do a lot about how do we break up the notion of city. Are we really living in a city, or are we living in our personal villages? So when I ask the question, do you live in a village? It's really, I think that everyone does. It's a psychospatial phenomenon that we assimilate ourselves to an environment where it's human relations, it's connections, it's a spatial, of course, definition as well. Mic problem. And basically, these villages are the composition of our cities. And I would like to think that sustainability, which is our big topic of the day, has to do a lot with how we look at the relationship between ourselves and the spaces that we live in, but also just the definition of what the city is. So I'm an urbanist, trained thinking about space and design, and I thought to myself, well, how can I help this debate of sustainability? And I worked in different master plan scenarios. I worked with architecture and planning, and basically these were not satisfying because I always felt that we were not asking the right questions. We were always imposing sustainability on people rather than trying to solve the real question, which is how do we get people involved in it? How do we get people interested in sustainability? So we are being a little greedy. I think we all know that. And definitely our consumption patterns have gone a bit wild, and we need to find new ways to utilize space. A lot of people think about densifying the city. A lot of people think about creating, let's say, fantastic visions that will bring us all together and recycle, create closed loops, have a perfect lifestyle. And that's a very nice thought, but if you really look at it, about 10% of the built environment is actually touched by designers or design professionals. Most of the world is not touched by design professionals. So how do we bring the other 90% into the game of sustainability when designing cities and places? Well, basically there's not many ways. We haven't really found a solution to scale up. And I'd like to think that we need to find a new way. It felt very heavy on me as a professional of placemaking, and I sort of set out to create an organization which would gather best practice and look at how we could solve the problem of scaling up sustainability from a people perspective. So designing places for people, with them, through them, by them, rather than imposing it. And so one of the key words here is process. And I have an image here of a place which is in Barcelona where we started our adventure. And this was a kind of grand-scale co-creativity experiment where we invited professionals and experts from around the world. About 100 people were put together to think about how you can use co-creativity to make placemaking something different, not the traditional way of imposing planning. So one of the core ingredients is listening, is the ability to listen. And it seems like in design there's a huge culture of egotism and egoism, where you want other people to listen to you and to your ego and your need to actually satisfy your capacity to impress. And I think that that's probably where design fails a lot, that it doesn't impress a lot because it doesn't start from the assumption that actually people want to be seduced, rather than having people just absorb what you think is right for them. And, oh. Did I do something here? Okay, I'll just continue. Sorry for the long hair. It's just I've come back from a glacier hike a few days ago, and it seems like I've wanted to keep the look of a mountaineer. It's obviously not compatible with this microphone. This is the system that we put together with a group of thinkers, professionals in the design space. And it starts with listening, and then we move into a co-design environment. So we curate, facilitate design through co-design tools. We let non-designers play with the design tools, and then we kind of create a contract, a relationship with people on the ground to co-implement, which a lot of designers don't do. They just come in and they say, oh, you should do this and this will be looking like that, and then they are not involved anymore in the process. So designers disengage their responsibility, except from a liability perspective when it touches a building. And I think that's a big error. We need to have designers that actually play hand in hand with the locals. And then we have a system where we reassess, and it's evolutionary. It's not something where there's a perfect picture. It's something that you work towards. It's the incremental steps. It's the ladder that we design in progress, not the actual artifact. So I mentioned the process is king. To have an effective process, you need to involve the local community a maximum amount. And basically, that's something that we do now. I will get onto it. And we involved a dose of global expertise. So there is best practice out there that we want to learn from. So it's not to say that it's only bottom-up or top-down. Right now, we sort of have a dialectic of saying, well, bottom-up is great, or top-down innovation is great. There's two schools of thought. And what we want to do is to basically say, well, we need to marry those two schools of thoughts. There needs to be a ground-up, a swell of ideas, of relevance, etc., but there also needs to be some perspective and understanding from the rest of the world, people that have already tried something. So that's basically how we do it. And these are the kinds of environments that it looks like. It's a big design charrette, but it's applied to the place. And we get people involved. We have different design tools that they can work with. These are tabletops that concentrate ideas. It's like a funneling process. And so Clear Village, which is the organization's name, is funneling the whole ideation process and creates an action plan at the end, so that you can have a strategic leadership sort of driven tool at the end of it. So this is just the kind of environments again. So we worked in Helsingborg, which is part of the reason why we're here today. We worked for the State Theatre just next door. And our mission there was to try and co-create, or if you want to say co-create is maybe a big word because it still has to be done, but at least put some steps towards developing a new identity for the State Theatre through the involvement of locals to see what they need and how can the cultural institution be used as a bridge between the very wealthy and affluent part of the city and the less affluent, maybe ill-integrated part of the city, which is still looking for a way of defining itself in the city. So basically, a cultural institution becoming a bridge to rebrand the city, and our role is to facilitate that co-creation and be part of branding the dream. So these are some of the people that were involved here. Some of you are here. Thank you very much for being here. And we have done this in different places in the world. We're growing as an organization, and we have recently been to Italy in a project we call Love Athena, which is a sort of a village town split in two, very nice hilltop village, and then a town below it. And our role there was to ask locals what we could be doing to facilitate the relationship between the two cities, or just find a new dynamic in terms of what a Mediterranean village that's in the mountains could have in terms of new vitality. Because one of the problems of many places today is that city centers tend to swallow every part of the activity that's around, and then every, let's say, small city or provincial city just has no vitality. So how do we bring that vitality back? And that starts from asking people questions about what they would like. And so that is what we did. We have different tools, again, to ask those questions. Some are fun, some are involving food, some are involving dancing, music, etc. Some involve balloons and posters on walls. And this is basically small badges that people can play with, would say, well, I would like this place to be this. So you ask the place what it should be like. So people that are in the city randomly write things on these, and then you can start creating a picture, a kind of a wireframe of people's mind in the city, and oh, actually that is the kind of desire that they have. It seems to aggregate around this concept. So maybe they need a baker, maybe they need a bank, maybe they need an elderly service, whichever, or a new park. But basically it allows you to picture or map what the place wants to see happening there. Could I have a video, please? So one of our core beliefs is that ordinary places, so-called ordinary, thank you. Well, this is maybe not ordinary, this is probably not the main picture of a city, but this is a place just outside of, or actually in the center of Kiel in Germany, where we're working with a real estate developer and manager. My point is that ordinary places can become the places where we have a great possibility for innovation. Problem equals opportunity. And our work there is really to have stimulated a abandoned council estate where you could have the risk of making it into a ghetto over the next years, and try and facilitate the involvement of locals that live in those buildings that never speak to each other because they come from different places in the world, or they're elderly people that hardly go out of their house, and there is this fear factor, and they don't really speak together. So by involving them in a design process to try and improve the neighborhood, this is about creating, on the one side, value for the real estate asset owner, by saying, okay, you can increase your rent if people are happier. It makes, there's a logic of why you should pay more money if you're happier, So basically, this is what we're trying to do. Always service both the economic side, but also the person side. So this is designing for people. And we have a framework, which is a well-being analysis, to picture this and compare different places. Not only the same place and compare it over time, but also compare it between other places in the natural environment, social dimension, economy and governance, or architecture and infrastructure. And these are things that we do through one-to-one interviews. And it's quite effective to start a design process. This informs our labs. This is another project that we have, which is basically a walled garden outside of London that we're going to restore through a collaborative process. And this is very exciting because it's an old innovation place for agriculture and sort of a place basically where one could say that 150 years ago they were growing pineapples. So we hope that we can do something similar, replicate the sense of innovation by involving the local community and reboot a village through it. So I have a number of points that I'd like to make, but this might be a bit tight. But I think that a lot of the problem is how we've focused the debate around sustainability. And we keep talking about we need to be zero carbon, or we need to be this and that. And I think that if we concentrate on the notion of scale and focus on people, then we can actually leverage our ability to be more effective in designing places for people, and therefore have more success because of the livability factor. So This is about solving a crisis in the relationships between people and space. And I think that if we continue to do our sustainability work the way that we do, it'll increasingly become a new divide between the have and have-nots of sustainability, those that can live in the green neighborhoods and those that can't. So we need to address the emotional part. And I'm going to use an analogy to close my speech, which is that after 50 years of environmental activism, we're still losing the race. But let me ask you this question. You know coffee's bad for you, right? I mean, everybody knows that, but they don't act on it. I still drink coffee, even if I know it's bad for me. So how do we actually change the game? Well, I think that one of the main problems is that we keep thinking, hopefully, that our brain can override our inability to, well, basically that our brain is the pilot. And I don't think that. I think that actually we're emotional machines, yearning to be seduced over and over. And it's the feelings that really govern our actions. So we need to tap into those feelings so that we can become more sustainable. So I believe in the contagion and the mimicry to be the driving forces of adaptation. And one of the key words that we use is recoding places. So we want to change the software of places. And maybe these places that we're working in and other people in the world are doing similar co-creative work, well, they could become like the T cells of our sick Gaia to stop the virus, the cancer of unsustainable living. So spreading possibility through co-design is basically one of the things that we believe can be a problem solver for a lot of places. And it's time that we all stand up for our own village. Thank you.